Welcome back to the Fantasy Trading Room, hosted by Faceoff Sports Network. And today we're going to be diving into some Week 9 running back and wide receiver rankings, preparing you for your week. And we're going to be trying to get some big wins ahead of the fantasy football playoffs. I know I'm really having to lock in and dial in a bunch of my big leagues as the playoffs are just around the corner, and I'm sitting on the border in a few of those leagues. So this is going to be very important. But let's kick things off and dive straight into it with Tyreek Hill as their number one wide receiver against the Kansas City Chiefs in a tier of his own. I think that Tyreek Hill should be in a tier of his own on most weeks, but when he has a great matchup like this, there's no question about it. Hill is just dominating every single week, and I'm targeting these high-scoring games. High-scoring games will lead to more touchdowns, and obviously, touchdowns aren't necessarily something that you can rely on and predict every single week, but at the same time, touchdowns are such a big thing in chasing week-to-week upside. And if you're getting more opportunities to score touchdowns, that obviously increases a player's chance to score touchdown in that offense, especially when it's an elite guy like Tyreek Hill, who already is able to score a ton of touchdowns in the first place. But then we'll drop down to tier 2, where we have Ja'Marr Chase against the Bills. Again, the Bills are a very good offense, not a great defense, so this should be a high-scoring game. And the Bengals and Ja'Marr Chase are really starting to heat up. I think Chase is warranted as the number 2 guy, as where he was being drafted was 2. I think that Justin Jefferson's out. We had Justin Jefferson, Chase, and then Tyreek. I think from now on, we have to go Tyreek, Chase, and then Jefferson once he gets back. Then we have A.J. Brown against the Cowboys. Decently high-scoring game, and A.J. Brown's just been unreal. I mean, you have to have a few questions about the volatility at some point of his career, but recently he has not shown that at all. Devonta Smith has taken a backseat, and A.J. Brown is just like nuts. We're starting A.J. Brown until he has one of those, sort of down weeks and force us to reevaluate that. And we're going Stephon Diggs in a game with Ja'Marr Chase. Massive scoring game. Diggs is a stud. Don't overthink it. Then we have 5 CeeDee Lamb going against the Eagles. This is a great matchup as well. Like, these top receivers are all fantastic players in high-scoring games, and Lamb just exploded last week. So I'm going to be bumping him above Keenan Allen, who's at number 6 going up against the Jets. It's just because the Jets obviously don't have an elite quarterback or even a very good quarterback to where their offense is going to be able to push the pace of play, score a lot of points. Zach Wilson is going to try and slow the game down and win with their defense. But Keenan Allen is obviously a stud. Great Chargers offense. Herbert is an absolute demon. Then we're going to go to tier 3 where we have Cooper Kupp. I'm still ranking him super high going up against the Packers. Kupp is a stud, and he is a guy that can easily drop 20 points on any given week. There's a lot of guys where things need to go super right for them. They're more dependent on touchdown upside. Kupp is very dependent on his target share and receptions, and that's something that's very easily obtainable. The only question we have are about Matthew Stafford. Once we get some more information about that, we'll be able to move him up or down in this tier. And we're going to go Jalen Waddle, and now I wouldn't want to overreact, even though I love Waddle. He had a great game last week. That said, he had a pretty bad start to the season, and I normally don't like overreacting, but he's going up against the Kansas City Chiefs, and because of that matchup alone, I'm forced to bump him up to where I probably would have had him a little lower than consensus just because of how highly he was being valued. But in this fantastic matchup, I'm taking Jalen Waddle at wide receiver 8. Then we're going to go over to Adam Thielen against the Indianapolis Colts. Thielen is a guy that I'm not betting against. He's one of those guys where it's easy to see a path for them to fall off because Thielen is older, not a great offense. But at some point, you just have to stick your foot down and say, okay, we've seen the production. We've seen how elite he is from a fantasy football perspective. I'm sticking my foot down until proven otherwise and ranking Adam Thielen as a top 10 wide receiver because that's what he's been this year. Then we got Puka Nacua. He's had a rough on and off week. He's dealing with an injury, but at the same time, Davante Adams, I can't rank him ahead of Puka yet because Puka honestly has produced at a high level more recently than Adams. Jimmy Garoppolo just got benched, and I love Aiden O'Connell, but he had a rough first start, and I think he's still going to need, maybe this week and possibly next week before he can really help out Adams and Jacoby Myers. Then we'll drop down to tier 4. We have Chris Olave going up against my Chicago Bears, and they suck. I mean, they got Jalen Johnson, who wants out, so I don't even know what the situation is there. But Olave should be able to torch the secondary. It's just that thing of if Derek Carr can actually be competent. It really sucks, and I know that this is risky, but I'm starting Olave as a wide receiver. One low end, very low end this week because of the matchup. Then we'll go Garrett Wilson against the Chargers. Again, the Chargers should put up a decent amount of points. The Jets, not so much, but he's been really, really good. We kind of thought the season was over after Rodgers was done, but Zach Wilson has honestly come back in a pretty impressive way. And Wilson has been really efficient and put up a lot of fantasy points over the past few weeks. So I'm fine ranking him here. Then we got Devonta Smith. He's had a bad few weeks, but he's still great. And he's still in a very good offense that's going to score a lot of points this week. Next up, we have Mike Evans going up against the Texans. And this should be a gross game. But that said, Evans has been pretty good so far. We're going to throw him in here. Then we got Michael Pittman against the Panthers. Again, not a great game. But Pittman is seeing almost every single target in this Colts offense alongside Josh Downs recently. Then we have DK Metcalf against the Baltimore Ravens. Metcalf has actually been very good this year, coming off an injury. So I'm going to have to rank him all the way down here. But as you'll see later on, there's not really a bunch of guys that I would rather have ahead of him. Tier 5, we have DJ Moore. And he's been pretty bad as of late, averaging 11 points per game in the past 3 games with Bagent. But again, the Saints aren't a great team either. He's getting shadowed by Lattimore. Normally, that doesn't really end up panning out because he's going to see a significant number of snaps, not against Lattimore, to where it's not really going to matter. And the thing is, DJ Moore has been getting 7.67 targets per game in the last 3 games with Bagent. The issue is his yards down the field is very low, and he hasn't scored a touchdown. I think he's due for one of these to increase. Bagent doesn't necessarily have a great arm, but his arm is not horrible like others say. I think he can push the ball down the field. I think one of these 2 factors has a pretty good chance of increasing this week, putting DJ Moore about 1450 fantasy points this week. Then we're going to go to Zay Flowers, who is still the wide receiver 1 for the Ravens. Lamar's looked pretty good. He had a lot better passing games early on in the year, but I think he's still a pretty good overall quarterback. Flowers is the wide receiver 1 and a very talented receiver. We got Terry McLaurin, who's been very good as of late. The only reason I have him a little lower is because the Patriots are known for slowing down games, and I still don't love this Commanders offense. Next, we'll head over to Tier 6, where we have DeAndre Hopkins, who just played, had 10 points today. I had him a little lower. I think the upside was still there with Levis. Just wasn't able to connect. Levis didn't have a fantastic game. Then we got Jordan Addison with the new addition of Josh Dobbs. I think he kind of saved his value to some extent, but I still have to rank him pretty low. T. Higgins has been banged up. I think he's going to be on an upwards trajectory, but I can't have him much lower than the wide receiver 2 at a low-end cost, but I just don't really want to have him much higher than this at the same time. At 24, we have Amari Cooper, and Deshaun Watson probably won't play this week, but there's not a whole lot of other guys I would start over Cooper. I think we have to trust the talent here. So let's head over to the running back position. And we have 3 guys in Tier 1. Starting off at number 1, Austin Eckler, going up against the New York Jets. And Eckler is just that Tier 1 guy with no McCaffrey. He's a great pass catcher and should be able to run the ball somewhat in a slowed game environment. Then we're going to number 2, Alvin Kamara. I mean, the Bears just make almost every running back look like the next Christian McCaffrey. So Alvin Kamara can already catch the ball extremely well, and I'm not betting on that to decline until we see it actually happen. The Bears suck. The Saints should win, and Kamara is going to be able to get that receiving work and rushing work. Then we have DeAndre Swift, and I like Swift. It's not a great matchup, but the Cowboys have allowed the 12 most fantasy points to running backs this year. Eagles are favorites, and Swift has just shown that he can command targets, through the air, and Hurts is willing to check the ball off to some extent. Then we're going to Tier 2. We got Saquon Barkley against the Raiders. Should be a gross game, but the Raiders are very bad. The Giants actually have a chance of staying in this game. Then we're going to go Jonathan Taylor against the Panthers. The Colts should be winning this game as well, which helps out Taylor a ton. There's just not a whole lot of other guys that have been great recently. So Taylor had a fantastic week last week. He's improving, and we have all these other guys like Bijan, who's had some struggles, Tony Pollard, Josh Jacobs, all had some struggles, but they're still obviously tier 2 guys because the running back position sucks, and they have the talent, just not great matchups this week. Also, at 6, we have Breece Hall against the Los Angeles Chargers. Hall has been great, and I think that he is also on the same path as Taylor, as he's going to keep increasing in value as the weeks go on, and his situation gets better coming off that ACL injury. But then let's go to tier 3, where we have Raheem Mostert against the Chiefs. And even though this is going to be more of a pass-heavy game, because of how many points I've scored, like I talked about, it's going to increase that touchdown upside, which Mostert kind of relies on to some extent. He's a very efficient running back, but really just a lot of points should be scored. I think we have to rank Mostert here. I'm ranking Kenneth Walker one spot below Mostert because, as I was worried about to some extent before the season started, Zach Charbonnet had almost the same number of snaps as Walker. And I think that's going to continue to increase to some extent. Obviously, Walker is still a great back, but so is Charbonnet, who's a second-round pick, and he's going to get a much bigger workload down the final stretch of the year than he had at the beginning of the season. Then we have Joe Mixon against the Buffalo Bills. Mixon's in a good offense. He's going up against the Bills, high-scoring game. Don't love Mixon as a talent anymore, but it's a pretty good situation and matchup this week. We got Derrick Henry against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And, I mean, with Henry, I really thought that he was going to get traded. Obviously, he didn't. Still had a big game because the Titans were winning for a lot of this game. However, I don't know if I love Henry the rest of the season, but it was fair to rank him here. Probably should have had him slightly higher. Then we have Isaiah Pacheco at 14. Pacheco is honestly a back I really like because he's increasing his role as a pass catcher. Great matchup. A lot of points scored, like I said, going up against the Miami Dolphins. Here's where it starts to get real rough. We have Rachaad White against the Texans. Decent matchup. Rachaad White is still getting almost every touch. I have to put him here. I know we've been murmuring about him so many times. I have to put him here. We got Gus Edwards. His efficiency has not been great. He scored 3 touchdowns last week. I really don't want to have him that high, but the Ravens are a good offense. He's getting a lot of touches, even though Justice Hill is actually seeing almost more touches than him at this point. I don't know. It's just this is at the point where the running back position is so gross. Ramondre Stevenson has risen up and fallen right back down again after a brutal last week's performance. He has pass catching upside, which is more than we can say about a lot of guys. James Cook has been very inefficient, isn't getting every touch like we thought he would. Aaron Jones is limited. Like, this is gross. Then we're going over to Chuba Hubbard, who is probably the starting running back, but he had 1.9 yards per carry last week. He's not a good running back. Hopefully this can be an outlier. He bounces back. But I just can't have a guy that had less than 2 yards per carry, higher than RB20. Then we have Jerome Ford, and he should be getting even better coming off the injury. We thought he was going to be silent for a while, but he came back and played surprisingly, pretty well last week. Not necessarily from a fantasy perspective, but he was on the field. He was getting about 50% of the snaps. I expect that to go closer to where he was before his injury in week 9. We have Kareem Hunt. Don't love Hunt, but he should probably still be getting a fair amount of snaps with Ford still not 100%. Then we're going to Zach Moss. We just got to hope and pray that he gets some more of the same touches. He didn't have a great week last week, even though he had a decent amount of touches. But Zach Moss is still somewhat involved. And I'd say he's a pretty solid running back at this point. It just kind of goes to show how bad the running back landscape is. Then Najee Harris had 15 points he had a really, really interesting game. So Najee Harris was a guy that no one liked, but the Steelers actually were able to keep this game close and make it interesting. So that really helped out Harris. He was able to pick up 16 carries, 69 yards, 4.3 yards per carry, finally efficient, and the touchdown basically saved him. He had 7 targets too, I'm sorry, 7 receiving yards on 2 receptions, so he was somewhat getting involved as a pass catcher. It's tough to say. These running backs are gross, as we're going to say every single week. But I really hope this helped you guys out. If you're looking forward to some more running back and wide receiver rankings, we are going to be back here every single Friday to help you win your week. If you want some waiver wire pickups, we post them every Tuesday as well. And I'm going to be producing both those videos. So if you enjoy my content, please subscribe to the Face Off YouTube channel. And again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.